Welcome to the All Creatures Great and Small recap. Set in the 1930s, recently leaving his veterinary college, James Herriot is searching for a new job. He lives with his mother, Hannah, and his father, James Sr. He leaves to go out for an interview in Derby, getting off at the wrong stop. He arrives late and drenched in the rain, greeted by the housekeeper Mrs. Audrey Hall and friend of Siegfried Farren, the owner of the veterinarian clinic and the interviewer. However, the interview is slightly different. He is made to follow him throughout the day as a veterinarian, having multiple tumbles but successfully finishing the job. He's granted with a pint of beer and a new assistant job. He gets to know the locals too well and ends up feeding the cats in his drunken state. He mixes up the cats for surgery and Farren is forced to fire him. As he is about to leave, he sneakily takes the initiative for a new job on calf birthing. Farren is furious but decides to give him the job back. He is given a luxurious Rover to pick up Tristan in, Siegfried's brother, from the train station. He admits that he has finally passed all his exams and is now a licensed veterinarian, and Siegfried is astonished. Belated, he buys him a new car and gives him the chance to follow James around town. However, his room is moved into a secondary closet. They visit Mrs. Pumphrey and he treats her dog Tricky. They are invited to a party where James hits on a girl named Helen Alderson, but she already has a boyfriend and landlord named Hugh, and is rushed off when he falsely gave a farmer the word to send his healthy cow to the butcher. Farren's night turns worse when he returns to horrible news that Tristan lied about passing the exams. He is sconed and forced to sell the new car. James goes to treat a new horse, but on further inspection, it had a torsion in its bowels, and some of its tissues are in necrosis, meaning he is forced to put the horse down. Hugh, the owner, is visibly frustrated at his racehorse death. Hearing of this, Tristan bets on a different horse and bonds with Maggie the bartender. Siegfried decides against sending Tristan to the college and tutor him at the clinic. Then he will be able to pass the exam. James volunteers at a fair in town, suggesting to the Rudds a cow to buy and exposing the lie that Helen's cow Clive is unfit for first place and is actually injured. Helen gets angry at Hugh for trying to lie about the condition of the cow, but he manages to fix everything when he admits that he did everything because he loved her. James helps save Rudd's cow by draining the abscess, and he is promoted to senior veterinarian and they celebrate his birthday. Sadly, he finds out that Helen is a fiance now. Hugh proposed and she said yes. They throw a party for Christmas Eve, inviting over people from town, and Mrs. Hawes waits for her son Edward to come see her. James is hastily rushed off as he gets a call for a puppy birth, but Helen opts to join him and get away from all the people talking about her marriage the next day. They successfully give birth but are slow to return as a fog has brushed over and they are unable to see right in front of them. They are forced to stay overnight. In church, Siegfried comforts Audrey as Edward has not shown up. In her previous line of work, her son stole and she was forced to report him, getting 6 months in the Offenders Institute for it. Helen wakes up in the middle of the night with a blanket from James. In the break of dawn, they head back to town for the wedding. Meanwhile, at the Farren estate, they open Tristan's test scores and he finally has passed, but Siegfried omitted the fact that he actually failed. James shows up to the wedding late to find that she has decided against the marriage and he walks her home. A few months have passed and James had returned home. He started working at a clinic there too, employed by Bill, who offered him a position in the future. He rejoins the Farrens as the Alderson's family dog Scruff has chased all the sheep and with the induced anxiety forced one of them to have a stillborn. Richard wanted to put him down, but James and Jenny work hard to train the dog to not scare the sheep anymore, and he finally gets to see Helen once again. Audrey bought Tristan a bag using Siegfried's money for passing the exams. Figuring out that Siegfried lied, they agree to give him the bag for his birthday and keep the failure a secret. With Tristan's help, James successfully asks Helen out to the local spring dance, but he leaves alone when she is scooped up by an ex-dancer. Meanwhile, Siegfried has made a new lady friend named Diana. Gerald arrives with an injured dog named Rock, and he starts to hit it off with Mrs. Hall. Helen and James start to see eye to eye, sharing their first intimate moment together. It is now Tristan's birthday, with presents to come, but also more responsibilities, and one of which was in an outburst. He finds out that he never really passed the veterinary exam, and James breaks the news that he might have to return home, as his mother accepted a job application for him. He rejoins Tristan in drinking all of Siegfried's delicious sacred wine. Siegfried urges James to marry Helen because he is too cautious for himself. Even Helen presses him to. They drive back to the farm where he helps them birth a foal. In the wrong order, he asks Richard Alderson for his blessing. He accepts and gives him the family ring. He is able to officially propose and she says yes. He celebrates with the Farrens and Mrs. Hall. The next day, they pick up his parents Hannah and James Sr., taking him out to a call and admitting that he won't be returning home with them. He has found a new home with Helen and the people of Derby, and they walk them back to the bus. Tristan has decided to try his luck at the veterinarian exams again. Months have passed and Tristan is back on Christmas Day. day. He receives the results and decides against opening them yet. They celebrate Christmas with the patrons and each other. It is James and Helen's first Christmas together, and Mrs. Hall gets closer with Gerald. Tristan finds out that Maggie is engaged, and they spend their last night together, realizing that he passed the exams and is now a qualified vet. Siegfried is invited over to Diana's for a private party. It is the day before James' marriage ceremony. Mrs. Hall stresses that they can't get James drunk or the wedding will be a disaster. Siegfried stresses that his time away will infringe on their clinic, passing by army recruiters on their way to the pub, with farmers expressing their possible infections in spreading tuberculosis and paired with excessive drinking. James wakes up in a barn the next day. Continuing on to check the entire herd, Tristan rushes over as his best man to try and help, but he is roped into assisting the cows, just as Siegfried arrives hours later to take James away. He merely makes it to church on time for the ceremony, and losing the rings, Siegfried offers them a paper one instead. They take a week off on their honeymoon, arriving back in town to find that townfolk are getting recruited into the army, and his name newly plastered on the clinic walls. Siegfried has decided to make him a partner, and with it a bed specially for him and Helen. James suggests more TB testing to be brought in as it will increase their net profit. Siegfried is stressed about an overseas horse named River, barely able to use it for racing. Major Seabright Saunders is debating putting him down, and Siegfried has to work tirelessly to ensure that he improves. It hits a nerve at home because when he was serving, herds of horses had to be put down so they wouldn't need to ship them back. He was also serving with Morris Oliver, who had recently committed suicide using sedatives. Helen is dropped off every day at the farm, where James suggests that the farmers need to sign up for TB testing. The downside is that if a cow comes up positive, there are grounds for the Minister of Agriculture to seize the entire herd and place them for slaughter, but infected by TB milk can cause the death of people. James proves Isaac Cronford wrong on his accusations of fake insurance claims, pressuring Richard Alderson into a TB testing after he is dragged into the conversation. James is struggling to take on the TB testing entirely on his own. He enlists the help of Helen to help him figure out which forms he exactly needs. Finishing tests on multiple farmers, he moves on to Rudd. All but one are healthy. He takes a sample for testing and finds it to be positive. Mrs. Hall is asked out on a date by Gerald, but upon further notice, she makes it clear that she doesn't want to be more than friends, as she is still in love with her ex-husband and misses her son Edward. He is forced to sign all the forms and shut down the farm for the time being, until Malik collects the infected cow for slaughter. For the moment, Tristan is cleaning up his act and bought a new car with his saved up money, even taking Florence Pandy out for a date. Her father is the rival to their clinic. James drives up to check on Rudd. Hearing that Malik took the wrong cow for slaughter, they chase him across the road. His car breaks down, but just his luck, Tristan picks him up during the date. They barely make it in time and Malik signs the form for release. Tristan drives Florence home and receives a kiss, admitting that it was the best date she had ever had. Alternatively, James is thinking about quitting TB testing. It is hard work, difficult for him and the farmers. Arriving back at home, James is visited by Mr. Harcourt, the Minister of Agriculture, thanking him for his great work on the TB testing. Jenny takes over the farm, dropping out of school to help out, whilst Helen is away. Tristan and Siegfried take in Andrew to show him the ropes after they promised his teacher they would. He helps save a dog named Benjamin. Siegfried admits that he wasn't ready for a child with his ex-wife Evelyn, but when Tristan came, he was. Then she grew ill and passed. He never really had time to help him or her. Mrs. Hall leaves work for a day to meet up with her son Edward, who finally shows and is in the Navy. She apologizes to him for telling on him to the boss and tried to rectify things. She chases after him and he finally accepts her apology and tin of biscuits, accidentally dropping them. A deaf interpreter tells her that he mouthed that he loved her, warming her heart. As she came back home, Tristan had made a shepherd pie especially for her, and Siegfried notes how much they all don't express their gratitude enough for her. It is the 1st of September 1939, and the stress of war is draining everyone. James analyzes Richard Alderson's farm. He has a cow with TB. They have to report it and the farm is shut down. After being invited over for lunch with Florence's parents, Tristan tests his luck at love. He proposes to Florence, but is immediately rejected, telling him that he needs to find himself by stepping out of Siegfried's shadow first. More problems arise when Siegfried mocks him for failing to get married. James and Helen spot evacuation kids from orphanages filing out, worrying that any day could be their last. Hitler's invasion of Poland in September forced Great Britain and France to declare war on Germany, hence starting World War II. A sad goodbye leaves James and Tristan, waiting in line for them to enlist into the army. They both eagerly await a recruitment letter. They have also taken in an evacuatee, Eva. As Siegfried goes up to check on Rivers for Major Seabright Saunders, he learns that Tristan is going to be recruited by the Royal Army Veterinarian Corps, and he stresses that they mustn't allow Tristan to go. With a knee fracture on the horse, racing is out of the question. But to get the colonel to bar Tristan, He will break his code and give Rivers an anesthetic for the race so he won't feel the pain. Tristan finds the anesthetic strange. Realizing what had happened, he calls the veterinarian of the race and gets River disqualified. The colonel screams at Farron. They talk about the ordeal over Christmas, Siegfried admitting that he hated him because their parents loved him as their favorite child. But despite this, Tristan decides to take up the offer, leaving to join the army. Audrey invites over Gerald for their Christmas party, and wrapped up in all the emotions of war, confesses her love for him. Just as Tristan entered, he leaves on the train. This is where the series ends. For another happy ending, watch this.